Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. This is Mr. Lauren with Reading is Fantastical. Hey, I have a special show for you today. I have a special guest. She's awesome, super awesome. I'll introduce her in just a moment, but just a quick disclaimer that we do indeed know each other. We work together and at the same company, in the same department, and in the same office area. So how about that? And so we've known each other for several years. So just to introduce everyone to Ginger Reeves. Hello, Ginger. Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. So thank you for being here once again. Now, I've told everyone who has been on this platform before that one of the reasons why I even started is because I've noticed that I have a background in just reading to my daughter, going to her kids zone when she was going through while she was in school, reading while she was at our special church or her kids' church, and reading to the kids there. Basically, it was like the kindergarten kids and I also went to her kindergarten classroom at her school and reading to those kids there as well as you mom and just various other organizations. So, and I've noticed that I was very engaging with the kids, spent more time on my knees than I actually did on my feet talking to the adults. So I said, hey, why don't just try to put that out to other people as well? And I noticed also that rather than having laptops and tablets as babysitters for kids, perhaps we can use some of the old school stuff and reading to kids and using some of our current devices like phones and everything else and still engage the kids in the same similar ways that we learned by having actual books and turning pages. So I can use that same old school, make it more and introduce it to technology and perhaps help to develop a love for reading for our kiddos. Now that brings us to yourself. Now you mentioned that at work you noticed that, hey, Lauren, I saw your podcast. So why don't we have you one introduce yourself, a little bit about how you came to talk about that, and perhaps some of your own family dynamics.
I'm Ginger Reeves, and I saw your podcast, and I actually have two boys.
Okay.
And my youngest, well, both of my boys struggled and were delayed at the beginning of school.
Wow. Okay.
But my youngest right now, he is in second grade. And one of the struggles is reading.
Yes.
And I thought, great, I love this podcast. Reading is fantastical. I'm going to
Mhm.
look on there, see what books he's reading, see, if there's any tricks that I don't already know that
Mhm.
I can help my kid enjoy reading. And so that's one of the reasons. And with my oldest boy,
Yes.
um, he was diagnosed at 5 with ADHD,
I
and
see.
he
Okay.
was severely delayed in preschool. Couldn't say his you know, couldn't say his ABCs, couldn't count to 10 in sequence.
Right.
And we did have him evaluated, and we did make the difficult decision to put him on medication. But
Yes.
once we did that, a
Mhm.
whole new universe kind of opened up for him. Um, the way I see it is for him, it was like he was driving 100 miles an hour in a car
Yes.
and couldn't pick up any of the information.
I see.
So, with that, with learning, I have to think outside the box,
Right.
get him interested in learning things. And
Yes.
reading was one of them, and reading comprehension was one of them,
Yes.
is
Yes.
remembering what he read. So, I would do things with him that helped. We would grab a book,
Mhm.
would read a paragraph, and then I would ask him, what was that paragraph about?
Right.
And then, we kind of would go through, or I would read the whole book, and then he would read the whole book, and then he would give me the synopsis. And for doing that, his magic learning was that I would give him extra time on
Ooh.
his Xbox. So
Ah,
he was
okay.
my video gamer. And so for every book he read, he got an extra 10 or 15 minutes to
Mhm.
play video games. And that worked really well because it was a reward system of you're getting this out and you're now I'm going to give you some extra time. And
Gotcha.
staying up later than his bedtime was also something that he found very rewarding. So I really listened and watched the way he learned and what he bought into. And I used that to help him. And he loves reading. He's one of
Yes.
my biggest readers. And we have a library up we have a two-story house. So I have a
Hmm.
library nook that we
Okay.
have a bunch of books. I
Yes.
have bean bags, I have little couch, I have a desk, and that is their reading area.
Okay.
Um, the other thing I like to do is at school when they have the book fair, I give them quite a bit of money so that they can go and buy whatever they want as
Nice.
for books.
Yes.
So they get a hefty allowance that more so than giving them money towards toys, I give them money towards books.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
that really helps. And when they do good in school and
Hmm.
they have good grades and they work hard, they get money in their little book, book checking account where they can bank it and
Right.
go buy books. So that was one of the things that really spoke to him.
Yes. Yes.
He loved that. We would take him to Goodwill and he
Hmm.
could buy how many books he wanted,
Nice.
especially when they used to have the Saturdays 50% off, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so we let him build that collection. And with him also, he, one of the teachers gave me some really great advice.
Hmm.
She said, whatever book he wants to read, let him read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and he loves stuff about World War II. Now, this is a
Okay.
kid that's 6, 7 years old wanting to read stuff that was not kid stuff, but I let
Wow.
him read it.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And he read up to it. He learned, how to pronounce those big words because he was interested in that.
Interesting.
So whatever your kid is interested in,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't be afraid to utilize that and go with it because it doesn't have to be his age. It can be whatever they want, you know,
Hmm.
provided it's appropriate. But,
Gotcha.
you as a parent, you get to gauge your maturity of your kid and what you feel is going to work best for them.
Because you know your child, obviously. So you mentioned a little earlier about delayed. Now, is there the proper terminology? Is there various terminology? I want to make sure that perhaps parents who are listening to this are using whatever words. How do we come up with that particular word?
So that particular word was came up by the school. So
Okay.
when I got my kids tested at the school, they used it as delayed, severe delayed, that kind of thing. But
Okay.
I don't see delayed as being a negative word. I
Okay.
see delayed as you just haven't figured out how to unlock your kid's brain yet
Okay.
to where that they can get the most information. And delayed, everyone at some point in their life is going to be delayed on something.
Right.
You know, we're not all 100%. I mean, some of us like to think so, but you know,
What are
there
you trying to
there are.
say, Ginger? What are you trying to say?
I'm not saying anything, but I think with that being delayed, what I heard is that we haven't figured out how to unlock your kid to where that they can soar and get all that information in. But I do believe that that is the proper terminology that
Okay.
I've gotten from the school district.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Now you mentioned about you have a library space in your home, a nook area. So how do you come about, I guess, putting books there? Did they go out and pick, or did you pick the books, or how did you get the books there?
So both, like I've
Okay,
picked some books, they pick books, and we just fill the library.
okay,
And we have a section lower on the bookshelf for my youngest.
okay,
Um, he all those books are appropriate for him
okay.
and he can read whatever he wants. If there's something that he wants to read,
Hmm.
I'm more than willing to look at it, introduce it. I mean, but for the most part, my kids haven't picked anything that I would deem inappropriate.
Okay,
Um, so we let them pick the books. My husband and I contribute. We will go to Goodwill. We'll find books that we think that they'll like, and we will add it to the library. My library has grown exponentially since it started. um, but that's kind of the point. And there's books for me and my husband too
sure.
that we add to the library, and we all go. And if there's, if you want to read a book and you want a space, the library space is the perfect place to go.
Right,
You can
right.
just go and sit, you can chill, you can do whatever you want, and they can read in their rooms too.
Okay.
The other thing that I like to do is creating a comfortable space and a
Ah,
space that I like. As a child, I loved reading in a very tight space. I like to go underneath desks and put my pillows
yeah,
and
yeah.
get cozy.
Nice.
So for my little one, what we did, and he likes that too, is we have a little outside playhouse that we brought inside.
Okay.
And we went ahead and I put pillows and blankets in there, and he'll go in and he'll go read his book. He's like, I'm reading. Even though he can't completely read, he
Yeah, yeah.
goes in and he pretends like he is reading,
Hey, hey.
and that's all that matters.
Right, right.
So those are one of the things that I like to do is creating a comfortable, safe
Comfortable place.
space for your kids to read. The other thing we did for a really long time is I got a teepee, like one of those kids' teepees, and
Oh,
that
yeah,
was our
yeah.
reading teepee.
Okay.
So
Reading
we did
TP.
that for a long time too, until eventually, we had to get rid of it. We had it for probably about 10 years, 10 or 12 years. So
Yeah,
we had
yeah.
the reading teepee, and if they were in there, they were reading, so leave them alone.
Leave them alone. That's right. Oh, that's very cool. I remember back in the day, you used to have a fort, you used to make blankets and chairs and get underneath there and have a flashlight and stuff like that. So we have a reading temp at TP. That's awesome
Yeah,
that they can go
yeah.
there and feel safe in there. Now, you mentioned earlier about limiting the Xbox. So you have a limitation to how much time they can be on their computer, having that limit. So I think that's something that we can do as parents a lot of times, a limited time. But the reward is that you do more reading, you can gain some time, some credit to be able to spend more time there. So that's sort of an incentive to be able to read. And
And
is it combined just reading a book, or you have to do a report, or it's just basically just reading the book?
so it's reading the book and then talking about it. So one
Talking
of the
about it.
biggest
Okay.
things about I think being interested is reading can open up your world of creativity.
Ah,
But if you
yes.
don't have anyone to talk about it about, then how do you get excited?
Right.
So it's reading it and then telling me, what are you reading, and getting me interested and going, oh, well, that's a book I didn't know about. Or,
Okay.
especially with my older son, is giving them that ability to talk about it and say, hey, or I ask him, what are you reading? How's it going? What do you like about it? And then
Mhm.
with my younger one, I'm more involved. I know what he's reading. We talk about it. I ask him to tell me, who was the main character of the story? What
Right.
was the story about? What did you learn? And those are the kind of questions that I think help, and help them get excited, because
Yeah.
you're excited when you get to talk about stuff that you like. I also do this with TV time too.
Okay.
So we
Okay.
do have a limit where our TV will shut off, or you're only allowed to watch 2 hours of TV and then it goes off.
Yeah.
So that way they can earn extra time by doing things by, we my husband and I, we're Generation X. So we
Yeah.
grew up outside. We
Yeah.
grew
Yeah.
up, doing more physical. And
Right.
so we really do, we've got bikes, we've got, motorcycles, all sorts of stuff for them
Yeah.
to also do outside activities,
Right.
and not just be on the phone or on their iPad or on their Xbox. So
Okay.
we want to give them a balance
Hmm.
of all of the good things,
Yeah.
because I don't think anything's bad. I just think that, if we can give them a bunch of different things and not having them sit and watch TV or play Xbox all day,
Right.
that
Absolutely. So it
staying
seems like the
7
key thing you mentioned about is parent involvement. So when it comes to reading and comprehension time, seems like everything stops. You guys get engaged. So that's the key, is that you're right there with it, be able to answer those questions as opposed to giving it, walking away and saying, What'd you read?" or whatever. So you being right there seems to be a key point.
Yeah. And with a kid, you can't do that. Like, you
Okay.
have
Right.
to
Right.
be involved. With my teenager, yes, I can obviously do that now. But when we were younger, or when he was younger, we did not. We were very involved. You would read to me, or I would read to you. And it wasn't every single time they had to read. We would switch off. And with my younger kid, some of the things that worked with my older don't work with him. And
Ah,
so I had to change and taper some things with him. He's a little bit more delayed, and so it's and he also has ADHD as well,
Oh, I
but
see.
his
Okay.
is a little different.
Mhm.
So what I do is I read to him first,
Okay.
then I have him read to me where he doesn't always know the words, but he reads through it, he makes
Yeah.
it up, or he
Yeah.
remembers what we read, and then at the end we read it together where we sound out each word. And
Right.
so that works for him. And for him, it's a memory thing. So repetition is the key.
Okay.
So usually with his book, I will do the same book for a week. And then at
Okay.
the end, I expect, at the end of the week, he usually has progress,
Okay.
and then I will ask him, do you want to keep reading this book or do you want to pick a new book?
Okay.
And he'll tell me either way. And if he's
Okay.
like, pick a new book, then he gets to go and pick whatever book he wants. And then that's the one we read for the next week.
For this next
Um,
one. Okay.
so, and it's asking your kids questions on what they like too. Did
Yeah.
you like this book? Or was this book not your favorite? So you're
Okay.
figuring out what they're interested in. And that is the key because if you know what they like,
Right.
then you can kind of go with that. And for my youngest, he is prize motivated. He is very prize motivated. So
Yeah.
I bought a bunch of little things, little prizes that I put in little bags. And
Yeah. Yeah.
every time he reads, he gets to pick a prize and he
Okay.
gets to open that up. And
Okay.
so for him, at 8 o'clock, he comes and he gives me that book because he's ready to read and get his prize at the end.
Okay.
So,
8 o'clock is the time. So he knows, okay, 8 o'clock is
yeah,
reading time. Oh,
yeah.
so having a
So,
consistency, is that matter too? Having a consistent time?
it depends on the kid, to
Depending
be
on the kid. Okay.
completely honest with you, because
Yeah.
my oldest, that did not work.
Okay.
With my youngest, it works, and sometimes we have to move it a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think consistency, knowing that every night before he goes to sleep, he's going to read a book.
I see.
Um, helps. You can do it, before dinner. You can do it whatever time works for you as
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
But with him, it works because, again, he's prize motivated. So he knows in order to get that prize, he knows what he needs to do. And
Yeah.
that gets him excited
Yeah.
because he likes stuff,
Yeah.
So each kid, whatever, if a kid is food motivated, if a kid
Right.
is, whatever they're motivated. And I learned that by watching what
Yes.
excites them,
Yes.
watching how they learn and what they retain. So you can tell a lot about how your kid's motivated by what information they retain, because that's the information that they're interested in.
Right. Now, I think it was the oldest you mentioned, World War II. How did they get onto World War II? Where did that come from?
Funny enough, I worked at the Air Force Museum when he was born,
Oh.
and he would come a lot, and they had him in one of their commercials,
Uh-huh.
and they were in the World War II hangars, and he just fell in love with those planes.
Wow.
And so he got interested in World War II, and I'm interested in World War II and
Okay.
other things. And so he was around that as a child, and he
Yes.
got to meet a lot of people that were in World War II and Vietnam and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
he really got interested in it by, I guess, the environment that he grew up in.
So sharing a lot what you do, where you go, what you like, and can influence, sometimes positively or negatively the kids themselves, but introducing some of what you did and some of your loves, if you jogged and perhaps the kids want to jog or whatever the case is. So seems like I really love that fact that you keep your kids involved, what you do, where you're going, and you guys stop when it's time to make sure you pour that attention into them so they can know that you're there for them.
There's always a learning opportunity, I feel, and learning just doesn't have to be in the classroom.
Ah, yes.
And I think that my husband and I kind of take that approach. We do also what really the kids loved is we do geocaching, where it's an app on your phone
Okay.
where other people have hid little things out in the world. There's geocaches all over. And we
Wow.
take that time and we go outside and we find where they hid it and then we replace it with something else so
Yeah.
that the next person who geocaches. So even though like that's not reading, but that's learning, it's learning how to read a map. It's
Yeah.
learning where to find clues. It's critical thinking and not
Yes.
giving up when it doesn't work the first time or you
Right.
can't find it.
Yeah.
So we do find that we take our kids to a lot of museums,
Hmm. Hmm.
and talk about history
Yes.
and do a lot of stuff where I feel like in this environment, there's a lot about things that you can get in toys, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that you can do that is
Do.
going to have lasting memories. Because as a kid, do you remember that toy as much as you remember that memory?
Yeah. Creating
And
memories. Yeah.
we do a lot of things with creating memory and education and learning those type of things. Like for my kid's 15th birthday, he wanted to go see the missile silo in Tucson. So we made it a big deal.
Yeah.
We rented a hotel room,
Yeah.
and the whole day was about the stuff that he wanted to do. And he learned a lot. And actually, I learned some things about my dad and his military service that I didn't know. So, you never know. There's learning everywhere. And getting involved with your kids, I think you learn a lot too.
It's interesting you mentioned that because even the last couple of days, I was talking to my daughter, and out of all the things that she remembers, we kind of talked about going to the Carson Caverns. And so going there, she remembers that feeling how she felt the humidity and that she still had her t-shirt. I said, "Did I buy that for you?" She said, "Yeah." And I had completely forgot about it, but that was one of the things that she remembered. And also that we went to the biosphere through U of A, I believe. And so how the plants and the water and that whole enclosed environment, that those are the things that she remembered. I wanted to introduce those different things as part of her birthday gift rather than just have a party to go to a
Yeah,
different place. We went to Library of Congress in DC, like I
that's all.
said, the Biosphere, Carson Caverns, all these different things that we can do as part of her birthday rather than a cake and a toy or a gift that we can't find or we've had to replace because now she's in college.
Yeah,
But she remembers that memory. That was just a couple of
yeah.
days that she'll carry with her and going forward. So that's awesome that you mentioned that those creating memories are things that are long lasting that you'll take now and going forward into the future. So that's awesome.
And giving them a love for learning. You
Love.
know,
Yeah.
I think that school is great, but sometimes they have to do it so structured. And
Yeah.
especially if nowadays kids are so, they've got the internet and everything at their fingertips, but just, introducing love learning, being out there and getting
Yeah.
to learn information. And that's kind of what I try to do with my kids because I did not have it so easy in
Yeah.
school.
Mhm.
I know we touched base on this, but I was in special education because I
Wow.
had a
Okay.
hard time reading and
Yes.
picking up information.
Sure.
And one of the things that I remember that kind of gave me a love for learning is we had an opportunity that a painter came to one of my special education classes, and I got to learn that I'm actually a good painter. I
Ah.
never knew,
Yeah.
but he taught us how to paint, and I was out there and I was doing my thing, and my painting actually got to go to the governor's ball and everything, and yeah, it won like an award, and I would have never known that. If I didn't have those experiences, and it gave me a love for learning. And you can teach someone things that it doesn't have to be the structured way.
Sure.
I
Sure. Sure.
learned colors, I learned how to paint, I learned how to figure out and critically think, how do I put this on a canvas? And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
also teaches you how to retain information
Right. Right.
because I retained everything about painting because I was
Yeah.
interested in it.
Yeah, you did it on your own. You initiated learning rather than being told, "Hey, learn this, learn that." You're out there actively engaging, trying to figure out like this color palettes and what brushes to use or whatever the case is. That's pretty awesome. My daughter, seemed like she thrived in a project-based learning environment rather than the structured curriculum or whatever. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
very
and that's the big thing is learning that for your kids of
yes.
how do they learn? Because
How to
once
learn?
you know how they learn, then you can really, do your activities to help, unlock their brain and make
Yeah,
them enjoy taking in information.
right.
And I think that's the biggest thing for my family because that's what I try to do for both of my boys.
Yes. Now, you talked about, we've kind of been touching upon it here, outside resources. Have you been working with any groups, organizations, or is it something that you kind of just by listening and engaging your kids one-on-one to know what they like and things of that nature? So, because some families outside there, perhaps they may need to receive help. That's one of the reasons why I started even engaging and talking to some other parents, because one of the parents and it sent me a message that, hey, I'm a new grandmother for my kiddo, and he is on a spectrum. What resources can I use? And I said, you know what? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. However, I'm going to go and figure it out. So I did reach out and talk to a clinical psychiatrist. So I'm going to be introducing him in a couple of weeks or so. But also, so when you mentioned that you're a parent, say, hey, what can we do to help other parents? So are there any outside resources that you work with, or how does that work for your family?
So I didn't really use a whole lot of outside resources. You can, like with the speech therapy
Okay,
teachers, they can give you some of the apps and stuff that you can use.
sure.
And that's great, but it doesn't work for every kid
Gotcha.
on there. And so I found really for me is, I would Google things and maybe ask questions. There are some support groups for like 80 kids with ADHD. For me, like especially with my older son, what was really helpful was looking into all the things with ADHD
I
so
see.
that I could really figure out what is the best way he could learn and
Yeah,
how, as a parent, I could support that
right.
and, know when to push and know when to back off a little
Yes,
bit.
yes,
And
yes.
so those were some of the things I kind of delved into. So I learned a lot about that. And by doing that, I learned a lot about myself as
Mhm.
well
Okay.
in learning. And I think just being open, honest, and listening and watching your kids,
Yes, yes,
watching what excites them
yes,
and going with it. Because your kids really are going to be the ones that tell you how they learn if you watch them.
yes.
And because I, you know, did have ADHD and was never diagnosed and kind
I
of
see.
grew up with that, I always, you know, I struggled with certain things that other people didn't struggle with.
Right, right.
And, my mom was a huge advocate and she would watch, she didn't know it either, but she'd watch and then she would, I learned from her by kind of not exploiting, but, learning what I liked so that that's how she kind of tapered me to enjoy things. And she
Yeah,
would read to me a
right.
lot because I was an audio listener. So it was
I
hard
see.
if I read for me to comprehend. So because I listened, she would read the books for me, and that helped out tremendously until I got older. And then I love reading. I
I
actually
see.
enjoy reading.
It's interesting you say that because even from the pandemic, seems like we learned different methods where watching a screen versus having an actual book and being in person and being at home. I think a lot of us learned positively and negatively as well how best to learn or what different techniques that we perhaps really never thought about before.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's been very interesting how people finally figured out, okay, or at least are forced because we were kind of separated to figure out
Yeah.
what is the best way to learn for yourself and perhaps for your family.
And if technology works, great.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, like for my son for ADHD,
Hmm.
online schooling was horrific
Hmm.
because he was so smart that he learned how to cut off his camera and, pretend to not turn in homework assignments
Yeah,
and that kind of stuff. So for a kid that, and a lot of ADHD kids are higher intelligence.
I see. Yeah.
And so the worst thing to do is then give them the space to think outside the box because they're
Right,
going
right. I see.
and so, I caught him, watching TV, but pretending that his camera was off, so yeah, the pandemic was quite interesting because he was like 12, so
Yeah,
that was right at the age. So we had a little bumpy road, but got back
yeah,
on track.
yeah.
And having a smart kid and having a kid that can outthink things, one of the things I definitely do is try to read ahead, try to stay on what's currently going on. And
Ah,
what I have with my teenager is called honest talk. We call it
honestly.
honest talk, where you
Yeah.
can just come in and honestly talk about your feelings
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
no judgment. And I was raised a big believer that you can come in and debating and not having the same opinion is good
Okay.
and really doing that. So I do a lot of that with him, and he does a lot of things where he reads or finds out online, and he'll
Mhm.
come and talk to me about it. And I think that that helps. I mean, no parent is perfect, but I do think trying to keep engaged with your kids is really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I got my little timer thing is letting me know to kind of wrap up here. So once again, I appreciate Gingeries, sharing your information, sharing your time, sharing how you kind of overcame within your family, and any other tips perhaps for a family out there who perhaps may be struggling and trying to figure out the proper course or any information that you can forward on to them, pass on to them.
Well, one of the main things is I would say don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't
Sure.
be afraid to ask for resources. Look online, ask your friends. Stuff like this is great. I found stuff when I was looking online, but also, asking, hey, and talking honestly about the struggles that you have. There's
Right.
nothing wrong with the struggles. And if your kid is delayed, it's not something that is bad. It just means that, you just haven't unlocked the way they learn yet. And
Sure.
so I do think as people, asking for those resources, talking about what you've struggled with. I
Okay.
know when I was with my son, we put him in karate, which was really helpful
Oh,
for my
good.
son
Yeah.
with ADHD.
Hmm.
And I talked to the other mothers, and it was so interesting to hear, everybody's struggle. So we did kind of start when he was doing that, was we kind of, all the mothers would look forward to each other and talk about how their week was going while we were waiting for them to do, while they were doing their karate. And you do feel when you can find someone else, you're not alone. You're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
going through this alone. Someone else is going through it too. It does help. It helps
Yeah.
tremendously.
No doubt about it. Yeah, I had my daughter in karate. She seemed to thrive in that as well. And one thing interesting that my daughter talked about, even for her when we were at church, she was in children's church. She figured out that because she knew a lot of things, the teachers would always kind of ask her to answer the question. And so she was almost like put on blast in front of the other kids. So she was like, oh. So now she almost wants to not engage, kind of not participate
Yeah.
because that way doesn't get called on, picked on, and say, "Who are you?" And so it's very interesting how she wanted to be, to show that she knew the information, but not in a environment where everybody's kind of watching and looking at her. So I found that very interesting.
And unfortunately, some teachers they're like, oh, well, they know the answer. And some kids are shyer than others. And
Yeah,
I was one of those shyer kids that sometimes too I didn't want to be, pointed out. And
right.
so when that happens, that can be kind of like, oh, you know, I want to fade into the background. But what I tell my kids is don't dim your light.
Don't dim your light.
If you
Okay,
know the
good.
answer, answer it.
Yeah,
And, the teacher's only, you know, picking on you or because they know that you're going to know,
right.
but
Yeah,
it does, like I was a shyer kid, so that was hard for me when I did get asked to do things, but I just owned it. And that's what
good.
I teach my or try to teach my kids is own it.
Own it.
Own your mistakes, own your vulnerability, own
Yeah,
your, not being perfect and just be like, "Oh well, that's what it is,"
yeah.
because unfortunately other kids do pick on you,
Hmm.
and that's something I struggle with my kids is how do you teach them to get through a tough week
Yeah, yeah.
when someone else is picking on them?
Absolutely. Well, once again, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time out, Ginger Reeves. So for those watching the podcast, please make sure that you hit the like, the thumbs up, hit the share, and also subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Thank you very much. Once again, this is Mr. Lauren with Reading is Fantastical. Have a great day. Take care. All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye-bye.